This house belongs to the younger generation now. My hands trembled as those cold words echoed in my ears. My own daughter stood there watching as her husband claimed ownership of the home I'd poured my life savings into. They had no idea what I was about to do next. I'm Vivian Mackenzie. I'm 68 years old, and I'm here in my kitchen in Provincetown, Massachusetts, the same kitchen where my great-grandfather Seamus used to tell stories about coming to America from County Cork back in 1923. This cottage has been in our family for over a century, passed down through generations of strong Irish women who never backed down from a fight. And let me tell you, after what my own family tried to do to me, I was about to prove that Mackenzie women don't go down without a battle. What happened to me could happen to any grandmother watching this right now. You work your whole life, you save every penny, you trust your children, and then you discover they've been stealing from you right under your own roof. If you're listening to this while you're having your morning coffee or folding laundry, tell me in the comments what you're doing right now. Hit that like button, because each like is so important to help my voice reach other women who need to hear this story. And subscribe to Grandma's Legacy, because no woman should ever feel alone when family turns against her. Right now, I'm sitting peacefully in my sunlit living room, looking out at Cape Cod Bay through windows that sparkle clean. My second husband Daniel is in the garden, and I can hear him humming an old Irish tune. The cottage smells like the lavender cookies I baked this morning, and there's fresh flowers on every table. But 3 years ago, this same house was a prison where I wasn't allowed to use my own living room, where I had to ask permission to do laundry, where my own daughter watched silently as her husband told me I was too old and senile to make my own decisions. The story I'm about to tell you will make your blood boil. It's about how my daughter Brooke and her husband Garrett thought they could steal my inheritance, my home, and my dignity. They planned to have me declared mentally incompetent, put me in a nursing home, and turn my family's century-old cottage into their personal money-making machine. They collected over $127,000 from vacation rentals, while I lived like a prisoner in my own home. But here's what they didn't know about this old Irish grandmother. I keep every receipt, every document, every piece of paper that matters. And when push came to shove, I showed them exactly what a Mackenzie woman can do when her back's against the wall. Let me take you back to the beginning, to help you understand just how deep this betrayal cut. The cottage in Provincetown has been our family's heart and soul since 1923, when my great-grandfather Seamus Mackenzie bought the land with money he'd saved working the fishing boats. Back then, Provincetown was still a working fishing village, not the tourist destination it is today. Seamus built that cottage with his own hands, plank by plank, shingle by shingle, dreaming of generations of Mackenzies who would call it home. My grandmother Bridget raised 5 children in that cottage during the Great Depression, stretching every dollar and growing vegetables in the sandy soil behind the house. She told me stories about hanging laundry on lines that whipped in the Atlantic wind, about gathering beach plums for jelly, about how the whole family would work together during blueberry season to earn extra money. "This land is your legacy, Vivian," she'd tell me, her weathered hands holding mine. "Promise me you'll never let it go." My own mother, Catherine, kept that promise. She raised me and my sister Colleen in that cottage, teaching us the value of hard work and family loyalty. Every summer, the house filled with cousins and aunts and uncles, all of us Mackenzies gathering for clam bakes and storytelling sessions that lasted until the moon rose over the bay. Those were magical times. Children running barefoot through seagrass, adults sharing whispered conversations on the wraparound porch, and always, always the sound of waves reminding us we were home. Colleen inherited the cottage when our mother passed in 2018. She'd never married, never had children, and that cottage was her whole world. She loved every creaking floorboard, every salt-stained window, every rose bush our grandmother had planted decades before. But Colleen's health started failing in 2022. Diabetes, then kidney problems, then a stroke that left her unable to live alone. In her final weeks at Cape Cod Hospital, she gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Vivian, promise me you'll take care of our home," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the beeping machines. Don't let strangers have it. Don't let it become just another vacation rental like all the others. Keep it in the family where it belongs. I promised her, tears streaming down my face. How could I know that my own family would become the strangers I needed to protect it from? When Colleen passed in March 2023, she left the cottage to me in her will. Not to both of us kids equally, just to me. Her lawyer explained that Colleen had been very specific about this decision. She'd watched too many family properties get sold off when multiple heirs couldn't agree. She trusted me to preserve our family legacy, to make the decisions that would keep the Mackenzie name on that deed for another generation. But inheriting the cottage also meant inheriting its problems. Colleen had been sick for 2 years and unable to keep up with maintenance. The roof leaked in 3 places. The kitchen hadn't been updated since the 1980s. The hardwood floors were warped from decades of beach sand and salt air. And the electrical system was so old, it was practically dangerous. The property inspector's report read like a novel. 12 pages of repairs and renovations that couldn't wait. My daughter Brooke and her husband Garrett came to the cottage with me that first week in March, walking through rooms that smelled of mildew and neglect. Brooke had always loved visiting Aunt Colleen as a child, collecting shells on the beach and listening to the same family stories I'd grown up hearing. She seemed genuinely excited about the inheritance. "Mom, this place could be absolutely beautiful again," she said, running her hand along the original pine paneling in the living room. "Look at these wide plank floors and the view of the bay from every window. It just needs some love and attention." Garrett was more practical, pulling out his phone to take pictures of every problem area. He worked in construction management and had an eye for renovation projects. "Vivian, I'd estimate you're looking at about $180,000 to $200,000 to bring this place back to its full potential," he told me. "New roof, complete kitchen renovation, bathroom updates, refinish all the floors, update electrical and plumbing. It's a big investment, but this location is prime real estate. Waterfront property in Provincetown doesn't come on the market often." I had exactly $195,000 in my retirement savings account, money I'd accumulated over 30 years of working as a secretary for the Provincetown School District, living frugally and never taking an expensive vacation. It was supposed to be my security blanket for old age, my emergency fund for medical bills or assisted living if I ever needed it. But standing in that cottage, remembering my promise to Colleen and my grandmother's words about legacy, I made the decision that would change everything. "I'm going to do it," I announced. "I'm going to restore this cottage to the beautiful home it was meant to be." Brooke hugged me tight. "Mom, are you sure? That's your entire retirement savings." "Your great-great-grandfather built this house to last for generations," I told her. "It's time I started thinking like a Mackenzie woman and invested in our family's future instead of worrying about money." Garrett nodded approvingly. "That's a smart long-term investment, Vivian. Property values in Provincetown have increased 40% in the last 5 years alone. You're not just renovating a house, you're preserving a valuable asset for your grandchildren." Looking back now, I can see how carefully he was already calculating the property's worth. But at the time, I thought I was making a decision that would bring our family closer together. I thought I was creating a beautiful home where my grandchildren Emma and Michael could make the same magical summer memories I'd cherished as a child. I was about to learn that some people see family legacy as nothing more than a business opportunity waiting to be exploited. The renovation began in April 2023, and for the first few months, everything seemed perfect. Garrett took charge of coordinating the contractors, and I have to admit, he knew what he was doing. He found excellent local craftsmen who understood the historical character of the cottage while bringing it up to modern standards. Brooke helped me choose paint colors and fixtures, and we spent hours looking through catalogs, dreaming about how beautiful each room would become. The old kitchen came down to the studs, revealing original 1923 framing that was still solid as a rock. "Your great-grandfather built this place to survive hurricanes," the contractor marveled, running his hand along hand-hewn beams. "We installed custom cabinets made from reclaimed wood, a farmhouse sink that looked out toward the bay, and granite countertops that complemented the cottage's natural palette. The new hardwood floors gleamed like honey, and when they refinished the original pine paneling, it revealed wood grain so beautiful it took my breath away. By August, the cottage was transformed. Every room sparkled with fresh paint and new fixtures. The master bedroom had a reading nook by the window where I could watch sunrise over Cape Cod Bay. The living room featured a stone fireplace surrounded by built-in bookcases filled with family photos and the books Colleen had loved. Most precious of all, we'd restored the wraparound porch where generations of Mackenzies had gathered for evening conversations, complete with traditional white wicker furniture and hanging baskets overflowing with petunias. But even during the renovation, I started noticing small things that didn't quite add up. Garrett was always taking phone calls outside, conversations that stopped abruptly when I came near. He'd installed a high-end security system with cameras and keypad locks that seemed overly sophisticated for a quiet cottage. When I asked about it, he explained that waterfront properties needed extra security because of their value and location. "Vivian, you're looking at $1 million property now," he told me. "These security features will protect your investment and give you peace of mind when you're not here." I didn't think much about that phrase at the time. When you're not here. Why wouldn't I be here? This was my home now. But Garrett seemed to assume I'd be traveling or spending time away from the cottage, which struck me as odd since I'd never mentioned any such plans. There were other little warning signs I ignored. Garrett insisted on having all the renovation bills and receipts sent to his email address for tax purposes. He said he'd help me organize everything for the IRS, claiming that home improvements could be deducted from capital gains taxes if I ever sold the property. Again, I wondered why he assumed I might sell, but I appreciated having someone handle the paperwork. He also pushed hard for specific renovation choices that seemed designed more for rental properties than family homes. He wanted individual thermostats in every bedroom, commercial-grade appliances in the kitchen, and tile floors instead of hardwood in the bathrooms. When I questioned these choices, he explained that they were more practical for heavy use and would hold their value better. "Trust me, Vivian, I know what buyers look for in this market," he'd say with that confident smile that made me feel like I was being overly cautious. The most unsettling conversations happened in September, as the renovation neared completion. Garrett started talking about the cottage's earning potential and how I could maximize the return on my investment. He'd researched vacation rental rates in Provincetown and calculated that the cottage could generate $150,000 to $200,000 annually during peak season. "You could easily cover all your living expenses and still have money left over," he told me enthusiastically. "Waterfront cottages like this book solid from Memorial Day through Columbus Day. You'd be crazy not to take advantage of that income stream." But I wasn't interested in turning my family home into a business. "Garrett, I didn't restore this cottage to rent it out to strangers," I explained. "I want to live here and create a home where our family can gather for holidays and summers, just like when I was growing up." His expression darkened slightly, though he quickly recovered. "Of course, Vivian. I'm just saying the option is there if you ever need the income. It's good to keep your options open at your age." "At my age?" I repeated, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the October weather. "You know what I mean," he backtracked. "Just that it's smart financial planning to have multiple income streams in retirement. Nothing wrong with being practical." But the damage was done. Something in his tone suggested he saw me as an elderly woman whose decision-making abilities were already questionable. I filed that conversation away in my memory, along with all the other small moments that were starting to form a troubling pattern. The renovation was finally completed in December 2023, just before Christmas. I'd spent every penny of my $195,000 retirement savings, but the result was breathtaking. The cottage looked like something from a magazine spread, with every detail carefully chosen to honor its historical character while providing modern comfort. Standing in the living room on that first evening, watching firelight dance on the restored pine walls, I felt like I'd successfully honored my promise to Colleen and my grandmother. I moved in officially on December 15th, bringing boxes of clothes and personal belongings that had been stored in my small apartment. Brooke and Garrett helped me unpack, and they seemed genuinely happy to see me settled in my beautiful new home. Emma and Michael, my grandchildren, were thrilled with their new bedrooms and spent the day exploring every corner of the cottage. "Grandma Viv, this is like a castle," 10-year-old Emma exclaimed, twirling around in the living room. "Can we have Christmas here? Can we build sandcastles on the beach?" "Of course, sweetheart," I told her, hugging her tight. "This is our family home now. We'll make so many beautiful memories here." I thought I was beginning the happiest chapter of my life. I had no idea that Garrett was already putting his real plan into motion. The first restriction started almost immediately after New Year's 2024. Garrett began showing up at the cottage unannounced, always with some excuse about checking on the new systems or meeting with contractors about warranty issues. But these weren't quick visits. He'd stay for hours, setting up his laptop in the living room and making business calls that seemed to have nothing to do with cottage maintenance. "Vivian, I need you to park your car behind the cottage today," he told me one morning in January. "I'm meeting with the security company to review camera placement, and we need clear sight lines from the street." I moved my car as requested, but noticed that his meeting involved 3 men in business suits who spent most of their time taking photographs of the cottage exterior and making notes on clipboards. When I asked Garrett about it later, he dismissed my concerns. "Just routine property assessment stuff," he said. "The insurance company needs updated documentation now that the renovations are complete." But the car restrictions continued. Some days I was told to park out of sight because of business meetings. Other days, Garrett needed the driveway clear for delivery trucks that never seemed to arrive. By February, I was routinely parking my own car 3 blocks away and walking home carrying groceries, while Garrett and Brooke used my driveway whenever they pleased. The living room became off-limits during what Garrett called client consultations. I wasn't allowed to enter my own front room from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on certain days, supposedly so he could conduct property management business without interruptions. When I protested, he acted like I was being unreasonable. "Vivian, you have the whole rest of the house," he said with exaggerated patience. "Surely you can manage to stay out of one room for a few hours when I need to handle business matters." "But what business matters?" I demanded. "This is my home, not your office." "It's complicated," he replied, using that tone adults use with confused children. "There are legal and financial aspects to property ownership that require privacy. You wouldn't understand the details, and honestly, you don't need to worry about them." Even basic household activities required his permission now. I couldn't do laundry on certain days because the washing machine was too noisy for his phone calls. I couldn't use the kitchen during business hours because potential clients might hear cooking sounds. I wasn't allowed to have visitors when he was working because it would be unprofessional. Rosa Santos, my neighbor since childhood, noticed the change immediately when she tried to visit in late January. "Vivian, why can't I come in?" she asked, standing on my own front porch while Garrett blocked the doorway behind me. "Mrs. Santos, this isn't a good time," Garrett interrupted before I could answer. "Vivian has had a busy day and she needs her rest. Perhaps you could call before coming over in the future." Rosa's eyes flashed with anger, but she kept her voice calm. "Vivian, are you all right? You seem restricted." "I'm fine, Rosa," I said quickly, not wanting to create a scene. But over her shoulder, I mouthed the word help. The breaking point came on February 14th, Valentine's Day. I'd planned to spend the evening reading by the fireplace in my living room, but Garrett informed me that the room was off-limits for a special client meeting that would last until late evening. Something about his smirk made me suspicious, so instead of retreating to my bedroom, I decided to take a walk along the beach and circle back to see what kind of meeting required my living room on Valentine's Day evening. What I saw through my own living room windows made my blood run cold. A young couple was sitting on my sofa, holding champagne glasses and looking remarkably comfortable in my home. Garrett wasn't in the room. In fact, The cottage looked empty, except for these strangers who were clearly not conducting any kind of business meeting. The woman was taking selfies by the fireplace, and the man was examining my family photos on the mantelpiece like he owned the place. I crept closer to the window, my heart pounding. That's when I saw it. A small easel on the coffee table with a professional sign that read, "Welcome to Coastal Elite Rentals. Your Cape Cod getaway awaits." The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. The security system, the parking restrictions, the business meetings, the professional-grade appliances, the rules about noise and visitors. Garrett hadn't been protecting my property. He'd been preparing it for commercial use as a vacation rental, with me as an unwilling and unknowing business partner. But I needed proof, not just suspicion. I walked around to the back of the cottage where Garrett had insisted I park my car, out of sight. Now I understood why. Guests shouldn't see the property owner's vehicle, because it would break the illusion that they had exclusive use of the property. My hands shook as I used my key to enter through the kitchen door. The couple in the living room was too busy enjoying their romantic evening to notice me creeping through my own home. I grabbed my laptop from the bedroom and locked myself in the bathroom, logging into the cottage's Wi-Fi network that Garrett had set up during renovation. What I discovered next made me feel physically sick. A quick Google search for Coastal Elite Rentals Provincetown brought up a professional website featuring dozens of photos of my cottage, both interior and exterior. The description read, "Luxurious waterfront cottage, completely renovated, sleeps 8 guests, private beach access, perfect for romantic getaways and family vacations." The rental rates were staggering: $800 per night in peak season, $500 per night in shoulder season, with a 3-night minimum stay. According to the booking calendar, the cottage was booked solid from Memorial Day through Columbus Day, with scattered winter bookings for holiday weekends and romantic occasions like Valentine's Day. I scrolled through dozens of glowing reviews from guests who'd stayed in my home. Perfect location right on the beach. Beautifully decorated with amazing amenities. Host was very accommodating and responsive. Every review thanked Garrett for his hospitality and professionalism. If you're feeling the shock and betrayal I felt in that moment, show your support, hit that like button, comment if you've ever discovered family members stealing from you, and subscribe to Grandma's Legacy, because we strong women need to stick together through the darkest moments of family betrayal. But the worst was yet to come. Digging deeper into the website, I found a property management section where Garrett had listed my cottage as the flagship property of his rental empire. He'd used my renovated home as collateral to secure properties for 3 other Provincetown vacation rentals, creating an entire business built on the foundation of my $195,000 investment. The financial records were devastating. In just 8 months of operation, from June 2023 through January 2024, Coastal Elite Rentals had generated $127,000 in revenue from my cottage alone. Money that should have been mine, money that was being used to fund Garrett's expansion into other properties, money that represented strangers sleeping in my bed and eating at my kitchen table while I was banned from using my own living room. Sitting in my own bathroom, reading about my home like it was a hotel, I felt something inside me snap. This wasn't just theft. It was the complete violation of everything my family had built over 4 generations. Garrett had taken my cottage, my investment, my future security, and turned it all into his personal business empire while treating me like a senile old woman who couldn't understand complicated financial matters. But he'd made one crucial mistake. This Mackenzie woman was far from senile, and I was about to show him exactly how sharp an old Irish grandmother could be when her back was against the wall. I sat in that bathroom for another hour, taking screenshots of every page of Garrett's rental website, documenting the booking calendar, copying guest reviews, and saving financial information. My laptop battery was dying, but I managed to print everything to the wireless printer in my bedroom. Dozens of pages of evidence that proved my son-in-law had been running a commercial business from my property without my knowledge or consent. When the young couple finally left around midnight, I waited another hour to make sure Garrett wasn't coming back to reset the cottage for the next guests. Then I spent the rest of the night going through every drawer, every closet, every cabinet, looking for more evidence of what he'd been doing in my home. What I found was even worse than I'd imagined. Hidden in the bedroom closet that Garrett claimed was storage space for cottage supplies, I discovered a filing cabinet filled with business documents. Rental agreements signed in his name, but using my property address. Insurance policies listing him as the property manager with authority to make decisions. Marketing materials for coastal elite rentals featuring professional photographs of every room in my cottage, including close-ups of family heirlooms and personal belongings that guests apparently found charming. Most disturbing of all was a folder labeled V. Mackenzie, Transition Planning. Inside were printouts from assisted living facilities, brochures for memory care units, and notes in Garrett's handwriting about cognitive decline indicators and guardianship procedures. One document was a draft petition for legal guardianship, claiming that I was unable to manage financial affairs and showing signs of dementia that compromised decision-making capacity. The plan was laid out in black and white. Garrett intended to have me declared mentally incompetent, become my legal guardian, sell the cottage to his rental business for below market value, and place me in a nursing home while he continued operating his vacation rental empire from the property my family had owned for a century. But there was one document Garrett didn't have, the original deed to the cottage, along with all the inheritance paperwork that proved my sole ownership. Those papers were locked in a safety deposit box at Provincetown Bank, where I'd placed them on the advice of Colleen's lawyer. Garrett could forge rental agreements and insurance papers, but he couldn't forge the legal documents that mattered most. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I made a plan that would have made my grandmother proud. At 8 a.m. sharp, I called Provincetown Police Department. "I need to report a theft and fraud," I told the dispatcher. "Someone has been operating an illegal business from my property and stealing rental income." Officer Patricia Riley arrived within 30 minutes. She was a local woman, probably in her 40s, who immediately understood the seriousness of the situation when I showed her Garrett's rental website and the hidden business documents. "Mrs. Mackenzie, this appears to be a clear case of elder financial abuse," she said, taking photographs of every document. "Running a commercial rental business from residential property without the owner's consent is fraud. The fact that he's collected over $100,000 in revenue makes this a felony." "What can I do?" I asked. "This is my home. I want them out of here immediately." "You have every right to remove them from your property," Officer Riley confirmed. "Since you're the sole owner and they don't have a valid lease or rental agreement, they're essentially trespassing." "Would you like me to escort them off the premises when they arrive?" I thought about my daughter Brooke, who'd stood silently by while her husband stole from me. I thought about my grandchildren, who would be caught in the middle of this family explosion. I thought about 4 generations of Mackenzie women who'd fought to keep this cottage in our family, and I made the hardest decision of my life. "Yes," I said firmly. "I want them removed from my property immediately." Garrett and Brooke arrived at 10 a.m. just like any other day, expecting to continue their charade of property management while keeping me isolated in my own home. But this time, Officer Riley was waiting in my driveway along with 2 other police officers who'd joined her for what she called a potentially volatile domestic situation. "Garrett Palmer?" Officer Riley called out as he stepped out of his car. "You're under arrest for theft, fraud, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent." I watched from my front porch as they handcuffed my son-in-law in my own driveway. His face went from confusion to rage to panic as he realized his scheme had been discovered. Brooke started crying and screaming at me, demanding to know what I thought I was doing. "Mom, how could you do this to our family?" she sobbed. "Garrett was just trying to help you manage the property." "By stealing $127,000 in rental income?" I replied, my voice steady despite my breaking heart. "By planning to have me declared mentally incompetent? By turning our family home into his personal business?" That's when I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Even as the police were putting Garrett in the patrol car, even as the evidence of his crimes was spread across my kitchen table, Brooke was still defending him, still blaming me for overreacting and misunderstanding what he was trying to do for our family. "You don't understand, Mom," she insisted. "The rental income was going to help secure your future. We were going to use that money to make sure you had everything you needed as you got older." "By putting me in a nursing home?" I asked, holding up the guardianship petition with her husband's signature. "By selling my cottage to fund your business empire?" For the first time, Brooke looked genuinely shocked. She grabbed the document from my hands, reading with growing horror as she realized the full extent of what her husband had been planning. The rental business was just the beginning. The real goal was to steal my property entirely and warehouse me somewhere I couldn't interfere with his plans. I didn't know about this," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Garrett told me the rental business was temporary, just to help you generate income from the cottage. He never said anything about guardianship or selling the property." I wanted to believe her. Part of me desperately wanted to think my daughter had been manipulated and deceived, just like I had been. But I couldn't forget all the months she'd stood silently by while her husband restricted my access to my own home, while he treated me like a confused elderly woman who couldn't be trusted with basic decisions. "Whether you knew about the guardianship plan or not, you knew he was stealing rental income from my property," I said quietly. "You knew I was being treated like a prisoner in my own home, and you said nothing." Officer Riley handed me a victim impact statement to fill out for the district attorney's office. As I wrote down the details of how my own family had betrayed me, violated my trust, and stolen my security in my golden years, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades, pure righteous anger. But anger can be a powerful tool when used correctly. And this Mackenzie woman was about to show everyone exactly how powerful an angry grandmother could be when armed with the truth. The next few weeks felt like a hurricane had torn through my life, but for the first time in months, I was the one controlling the storm. Garrett was released on bail after 3 days in jail, but the conditions of his release prohibited him from coming within 500 feet of my cottage or contacting me directly. Brooke was not charged criminally, but she was included in the restraining order because prosecutors considered her a co-conspirator who'd benefited from the fraudulent rental scheme. The legal system moved faster than I'd expected. Cape Cod District Attorney's Office assigned prosecutor Maria Gonzalez to the case, and she was furious when she reviewed the evidence. Apparently, elder financial abuse cases were a growing problem in Massachusetts, and she was determined to make an example of Garrett's sophisticated scheme. "Mrs. Mackenzie, this is one of the most calculated cases of elder abuse I've seen," she told me during our first meeting. "Your son-in-law didn't just steal money. He created an entire infrastructure designed to gradually take control of your life and property. The guardianship petition, the forged documents, the rental business built on your investment, this was a long-term plan to essentially steal your identity as a property owner. But the most satisfying consequence came from an unexpected source. Rosa Santos, my neighbor who'd been turned away from my door during Garrett's business hours, had been documenting everything she witnessed. As a retired paralegal, she knew suspicious behavior when she saw it, and she'd been keeping detailed notes about the strange activity at my cottage. "Vivian, I knew something was wrong when I saw all those different cars in your driveway and strangers coming and going at all hours," she told me over coffee in my kitchen. The first time in months I'd been able to have a friend over without asking permission. So I started taking pictures and writing down license plate numbers. "I have documentation of at least 40 different rental groups who stayed in your cottage between June and February." Rosa's evidence was crucial for calculating the full scope of Garrett's theft. Combined with the booking records I'd found on his website, prosecutors determined that he'd collected $127,000 in rental income while spending less than $8,000 on property expenses like cleaning and utilities. The remaining $119,000 had been deposited in business accounts that I had no access to, despite the fact that the rental business was operated entirely from my property using my $195,000 investment. The insurance company that covered my cottage was equally outraged when they learned about the illegal commercial use. Not only did Garrett's rental business void my homeowner's policy, but he'd been advertising amenities like private beach access and waterfront location without proper commercial liability coverage. If any guests had been injured on my property, I could have been held personally liable for damages that my insurance wouldn't cover. Mr. Palmer exposed you to potentially millions of dollars in liability, my insurance agent explained. If someone had drowned in the bay while staying at your cottage, or if there had been a fire or accident, you could have lost everything because your property was being used for commercial purposes without proper coverage. That revelation led to even more criminal charges against Garrett: insurance fraud, reckless endangerment, and violation of local zoning ordinances that prohibited short-term rentals in residential neighborhoods. The town of Provincetown was especially interested in pursuing the zoning violations because illegal vacation rentals were pricing out year-round residents and disrupting established neighborhoods. But the most devastating consequence for Garrett was the discovery process that revealed the full extent of his financial crimes. It turned out that Coastal Elite Rentals wasn't just stealing from me. He'd used fraudulent income statements based on my cottage's rental success to secure loans for 3 other properties. When those properties couldn't generate the rental income he'd promised investors, he'd been using money from my cottage to make loan payments and prop up his failing business empire. The FBI became involved when investigators discovered that Garrett had used interstate wire transfers to move rental income between bank accounts, making his crimes federal as well as state offenses. Financial analysts calculated that his total fraud scheme involved over $400,000 in stolen or misdirected funds, with my cottage serving as the foundation for an elaborate Ponzi scheme that was already beginning to collapse. Brooke tried to contact me several times during this period, leaving voicemails that ranged from tearful apologies to angry accusations that I was destroying our family over a misunderstanding. But I'd learned something important about myself during those months of being treated like a confused old woman. I didn't have to accept behavior that disrespected my dignity, even from my own daughter. The most painful consequence was the effect on my grandchildren. Emma and Michael were confused and hurt when they were no longer welcome at the cottage, not understanding why Grandma Viv was suddenly angry at Daddy and why they couldn't visit their favorite beach house anymore. Brooke used their confusion as emotional ammunition, telling me I was punishing innocent children for their father's mistakes. But I knew that children learn by watching how adults handle conflict and injustice. Did I want Emma and Michael to grow up thinking that family members had the right to steal from each other? That elderly relatives should quietly accept abuse to keep peace in the family? That women should smile and stay silent when their security and dignity were being stolen? No. I wanted them to learn that Mackenzie women fight back when they're wronged, even when it's difficult and painful. I wanted them to understand that love doesn't mean accepting mistreatment, and that standing up for yourself sometimes requires making hard choices that other people won't understand. The civil lawsuit moved parallel to the criminal case, and my attorney Jennifer Morrison from Cape Cod Legal Services was relentless in pursuing every dollar Garrett had stolen. She filed liens against all 3 properties he'd purchased using fraudulent income statements, froze his business bank accounts, and demanded a complete accounting of every penny that had flowed through Coastal Elite Rentals. Mrs. Mackenzie, we're not just seeking restitution for the rental income he stole, Jennifer explained during one of our strategy meetings. We're also pursuing damages for the unauthorized use of your property, the increased insurance liability you faced, the emotional distress of discovering your family's betrayal, and punitive damages designed to prevent others from attempting similar schemes. The discovery process revealed even more shocking details about Garrett's deception. He'd created fake maintenance invoices to justify keeping larger portions of rental income, claiming expenses for services that were never performed. He'd charged guests additional fees for premium amenities, like beach chairs and bicycles that he'd purchased with money stolen from my rental income. Most outrageous of all, he'd been advertising my cottage as his own family property, telling guests stories about his grandmother's vintage furniture and his wife's decorating expertise. Reading depositions from rental guests who described enjoying family heirloom furniture and grandmother's antique dishes, items that belonged to my grandmother and my sister Colleen, felt like a violation that went beyond theft. Garrett hadn't just stolen my money and my property. He'd stolen my family's history and sold it as entertainment for strangers. But perhaps the most satisfying consequence came in June 2024, when Garrett's other business ventures began collapsing like dominoes. Without the steady income from my cottage to prop up his fraudulent empire, he couldn't make loan payments on the properties he'd purchased with stolen funds. One by one, his investors discovered they'd been defrauded, and 3 separate lawsuits were filed against him by people who'd lost money in his vacation rental scheme. The man who'd told me, "This house belongs to the younger generation now," was about to learn that crime doesn't pay, no matter how sophisticated your planning might be. By August 2024, the legal victory was complete and overwhelming. Garrett pleaded guilty to 12 felony counts, including elder abuse, insurance fraud, theft over $100,000, and federal wire fraud charges. He was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $200,000 in restitution. Not just the $127,000 he'd stolen in rental income, but additional damages for emotional distress, property misuse, and punitive penalties designed to deter similar crimes. The judge's comments during sentencing felt like vindication for every month I'd been treated like a confused old woman who couldn't understand complicated business matters. "Mr. Palmer," Judge Catherine Walsh said sternly, "you targeted a vulnerable elderly woman, violated her trust, stole her life savings, and planned to institutionalize her to cover up your crimes. This represents a profound betrayal of family bonds and a calculated attack on an elder's autonomy and dignity. More importantly, all liens against my cottage were removed, and I regained complete control over my property and my life. The vacation rental business was permanently shut down, and new deed restrictions were filed that prohibited any future commercial use of the cottage. My home was truly mine again, protected by legal safeguards that would prevent anyone from ever turning it into a business venture again. But the real victory wasn't just legal. It was personal. At 69 years old, I'd proven to myself and everyone else that I was fully capable of fighting back against sophisticated criminals who'd underestimated my intelligence and determination. The woman who'd been told she needed permission to do laundry in her own home had successfully navigated complex legal proceedings, coordinated with federal investigators, and secured a $250,000 judgment against professional fraudsters. The cottage felt different after the legal battles ended. Every room had been reclaimed from Garrett's commercial exploitation and restored to its true purpose as a family home. I replaced all the furniture that guests had used, donated linens and dishes that strangers had touched, and gradually filled the space with new memories that belonged only to me. But the most beautiful change came in September 2024, when I met Daniel Murphy at a Cape Cod Legal Services fundraising dinner. Daniel was 72, a retired Coast Guard captain who'd spent 30 years protecting Massachusetts waters and the people who lived along them. He'd been widowed for 3 years and was volunteering with the legal clinic that had helped me fight my case. "Mrs. Mackenzie," he said, approaching me at the dessert table, "I heard your attorney talking about your case earlier. I wanted to tell you how impressed I am with your courage. It takes real strength to stand up to family members who've betrayed your trust." Daniel had kind blue eyes and weathered hands that spoke of decades working on boats and facing Atlantic storms. When he smiled, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, the warmth of being appreciated for my strength rather than tolerated for my age. Our first date was a walk along the beach behind my cottage, the same stretch of sand where I'd played as a child and where my grandchildren had once collected shells during happier family visits. Daniel listened with genuine interest as I told him about my great-grandfather Seamus and the generations of Mackenzie women who'd called this shoreline home. "You know what I admire most about your story?" he said as we sat on driftwood watching the sunset paint Cape Cod Bay in shades of gold and crimson. You didn't just fight for your property or your money. You fought for your dignity and your right to make your own decisions. That's what real strength looks like. Daniel understood something that my own family had forgotten. That respecting an older woman means valuing her wisdom and experience, not assuming she needs to be managed and controlled. When I told him about being banned from my own living room and forced to ask permission for basic activities, his face darkened with genuine anger. "Vivian, you're one of the strongest, smartest women I've ever met," he said firmly. "Anyone who treated you like you couldn't make your own decisions was either a fool or a criminal. Probably both." We were married in May 2025, exactly 2 years after I'd first walked through my inherited cottage and decided to invest my life savings in restoring it. The ceremony was small and intimate, held on the beach in front of the cottage with just a few close friends, including Rosa Santos, my attorney Jennifer Morrison, and Officer Patricia Riley, who'd helped me take back my home. Daniel moved into the cottage with his own furniture and possessions, but he never tried to change or control anything about my space. Instead, he added to it, bookshelves filled with maritime history volumes, nautical charts of waters he'd navigated during his Coast Guard career, and photographs of lighthouses and harbors that complemented the cottage's coastal character. Most importantly, Daniel brought laughter and companionship back into rooms that had been silent for too long. We started hosting dinner parties for neighbors and new friends, filling the cottage with conversation and music just like my grandmother had done decades before. The dining room that Garrett had photographed for rental advertisements became the setting for birthday celebrations and holiday gatherings, where I was the respected hostess, not a tolerated elderly relative. Daniel also helped me reconnect with my grandchildren in a healthy way. He understood that Emma and Michael were innocent victims of their parents' crimes, and he worked patiently to rebuild trust that had been damaged by months of family conflict. By Christmas 2025, both children were visiting regularly again, drawn not just by the beautiful cottage and beach access, but by the warmth of a home where their grandmother was clearly happy and valued. Emma, now 12 and fascinated by marine biology, spent hours with Daniel learning about tide pools and coastal ecosystems. He taught her to identify different types of seaweed and explained how coastal erosion had changed the shape of Cape Cod over centuries. Most precious of all, she began asking questions about our family history, wanting to hear stories about her great-great-grandfather Seamus and the generations of strong women who'd preserved this place for her future. "Grandma Viv," she said one summer evening as we watched Daniel teach her younger brother Michael to skip stones, "I want to study the ocean and maybe live in this cottage someday when I grow up. But not because it's worth a lot of money, because it's where our family belongs." That moment felt like redemption for everything I'd endured. Emma understood what Garrett never could, that the cottage's value couldn't be measured in dollars and rental income, but in the love and history and continuity it represented for our family. At 71, I was living the most fulfilling chapter of my life. The woman who'd been told she belonged in a nursing home was thriving in her own beautiful home, married to a man who cherished her independence, surrounded by friends who respected her wisdom, and secure in the knowledge that she'd fought back against those who tried to steal her dignity and won. As I sit here now in early 2026, 3 years after inheriting Colleen's cottage and 2 years after taking back my life from those who tried to steal it, I want to share with you the lessons I've learned about standing up for yourself when family members betray your trust. First, never ignore your instincts when something feels wrong, even if you can't immediately explain why. Those early warning signs I dismissed, the mysterious phone calls, the parking restrictions, the business meetings in my living room, were all red flags that I rationalized away because I wanted to trust my family. When your gut tells you something isn't right, listen to it. You don't need proof to start asking questions and demanding answers. Second, keep control of your own important documents and financial accounts, no matter how helpful family members claim to be. Garrett's entire scheme depended on me being confused about paperwork and grateful for his assistance with complicated matters. But the reason I was able to fight back effectively was because I'd kept the original deed and inheritance documents in my own safety deposit box, where he couldn't access or alter them. Never give anyone else complete control over your legal or financial affairs, regardless of their relationship to you. Third, document everything when you suspect abuse or fraud. Those screenshots I took of Garrett's rental website, the business papers I found hidden in my own closet, Rose's photographs of suspicious activity, all of that evidence was crucial for proving my case in court. If someone is mistreating you, start keeping records immediately. Write down dates, times, conversations, and incidents. Take photographs. Save emails and text messages. Evidence protects you when people claim you're confused or making things up. Fourth, don't be afraid to involve authorities when family members commit crimes against you. The hardest part of calling the police on Garrett was knowing it would destroy my relationship with my daughter and disrupt my grandchildren's lives. But staying silent would have meant accepting continued abuse and eventually losing everything I'd worked for. Sometimes protecting yourself requires making choices that other people won't understand or approve of. Most importantly, remember that your age doesn't make you helpless, confused, or less deserving of respect. Garrett's entire plan depended on convincing everyone, including me, that I was too old to understand modern business concepts and too vulnerable to make my own decisions. But experience and wisdom are strengths, not weaknesses. The life skills that helped me raise children, manage a household, and work for 30 years are the same skills that enabled me to fight back against sophisticated criminals and win. If you're watching this and dealing with family members who are trying to control your finances, restrict your independence, or make you feel like you're too old to make your own decisions, please know that you're not alone and you're not helpless. There are resources available to help you fight back. Elder abuse hotlines, legal aid services, and adult protective services exist specifically to help people in situations like mine. You don't have to accept mistreatment to keep peace in your family. You don't have to smile and stay quiet when people steal from you or disrespect your dignity. You don't have to let anyone convince you that you're too old, too confused, or too dependent to stand up for yourself. I'm 71 years old now, and I've never been happier, stronger, or more confident in my ability to handle whatever challenges life brings. My cottage is truly mine again, protected by legal safeguards and filled with love and laughter. My marriage to Daniel is built on mutual respect and genuine affection, not convenience or desperation. My relationships with friends and neighbors are deeper because they're based on who I really am, not who others think I should be at my age. The Mackenzie women who came before me faced wars, economic depressions, and social upheavals that make my problems seem small by comparison. But they all shared one crucial characteristic. They never gave up when their backs were against the wall. They fought for their families, their homes, and their dignity with whatever tools they had available. I fought back with lawyers and police officers and court documents instead of the determination and resourcefulness my ancestors used, but the spirit was the same. When someone tries to steal what belongs to you, your property, your money, your autonomy, your respect, you fight back with everything you've got. If this story of survival and justice touched your heart, like this video right now to show your support for women who refuse to be victims. Tell me in the comments about a time when you had to stand up for yourself against difficult odds. What gave you the courage to fight back? And subscribe to Grandma's Legacy, because every grandmother deserves to have her voice heard, her wisdom valued, and her story remembered. The cottage where I'm recording this message has been in my family for over a century, and God willing, it will remain in Mackenzie hands for another century. But more than that, it represents something that can never be stolen or fraudulently transferred. The knowledge that strong women don't back down from fights they didn't start, and they certainly don't surrender homes their ancestors built with love and sacrifice. To any woman watching this who's being told she's too old, too confused, or too dependent to control her own life, I want you to remember Vivian Mackenzie. Remember that at 68 years old, I took on professional criminals who underestimated my intelligence and determination. Remember that I won not just money in court, but the respect and autonomy that every person deserves, regardless of their age. You are never too old to fight back. You are never too vulnerable to demand justice. You are never too dependent to insist on dignity and respect. And you are certainly never too confused to know when someone is trying to steal what belongs to you. Stand up, speak out, fight back, and never ever let anyone convince you that you're too old to win.